Good afternoon, everyone. First, I should thank organizing committee, especially Professor Ranko, for the kindly invitation for me. And today, my topic is AKI, acute kidney injury diagnosis in China. First, let's look at some epidemiology data from China. This data is from our division, finished about 6 years ago. The overall incidence of AKI in our hospital was 3.19%. This study enrolled about 17,000 patients from 2004 to 2008. And we use AKI network criteria. And the mortality is about 20%. And the risk factor for AKI mortality was age, AKI network classification, septic shock, organ system failure number, ICU admission, and then need for RRT. And let's look at another study from Beijing. It is a nationwide cross-sectional study, including 44 hospitals and nearly 2 million patients. The AKI incidence is very low, nearly 1%. And the AKI mortality is about 12%. And let's look at the patients of intensive critical units. This study included 22 ICU and nearly 3,000 patients with the AKI division life criteria. The AKI incidence was 42% and the AKI mortality was 20%. And the risk factor for hospital mortality was FH2 score, solid tumor, severe sepsis or septic shock, and acute lung injury or ARDS and AKI. And let's turn to the children patients. This study included 27 hospitals and nearly 40,000 patients, also with AKI network criteria. The AKI incidence is very low, 0.32%, and the AKI mortality was 3.4%. And the three most common causes of AKI were urolithiasis, acute glomerular nephritis, and severe dehydration. And we also conducted a meta-analysis focused on the AKI incidence in Chinese hospitalized patients. And the overall AKI incidence were 2.4% to 3.2%. And for ICU patients, AKI incidence over 30%. And cardiac surgery associated acute kidney injury nearly 30%. And for elderly patients, it was very high, 68.5%, and contrast-induced AKI 8.6% to 16%. And as we know, there were 3 AKI criteria for AKI network and KDICO. And which is better for Chinese patients. And this study is to evaluate these 3 AKI criteria for the AKI diagnosis in Chinese patients, in ICU patients. It included 30 ICU and nearly 3,000 patients. We can see that AKI incidence is different with different criteria. Right for 46.9% AKI network, 38.4%, and KDIGO, it is higher than RIFLE and AKI network, 51%, and the predictive for mortality is the KDIGO criteria is more predictive for the AKI mortality than other two criteria. And for the cardiorenal syndrome, this study focuses on cardiorenal syndrome type 1. Also compare these 3 criteria. We can also see that the incidence of CIS type 1 is higher with KDIGO criteria, and the adjusted OR for in-hospital mortality is higher with KDIGO criteria than 2 other criteria. So KDIGO criteria was superior to RIFLE and AKI network in predicting short-term outcomes. So AKI burden of disease is huge in China because of the huge population in our country. And let's look at the global AKI incidence. It is a meta-analysis included more than 300 studies, and the overall AKI incidence was about 20%, and most patients from critical care unit. And in China, the AKI incidence is relatively low than the developed country. And why AKI incidence is low in China? I think maybe due to the following 4 reasons. Lack of baseline serum creatinine, because in our country, like in other developed countries, most people did not receive the routine health examination, so we lack of baseline serum creatinine, and the lack of repeated serum creatinine. And according to our hospital data, only 1/3 of patients received repeated serum creatinine, and the lack of e-alert system. And as you know, the electronic information system is poor in our country, and less morbidity. And so last year, we established AKI e-alert in our hospital. We use the lowest serum creatinine before 7 to 1 year before, 7 days to 1 year before admission as the baseline serum creatinine, and we use expanded KDIGO criteria. And we can see that before the establishment of e-alert system, the AKI incidence in our hospital is about 3.59%. And after establishment of e-alert system, the incidence of AKI increased to 10% in our hospital. And two-thirds is hospital-acquired acute kidney injury, and 1/3 community-acquired AKI. And we also established a dynamic predictive model for AKI. Before we established a predictive model, we evaluated the four models, evaluated the predictive value for AKI of four models that these are AKI CS, Cleveland model, meta model, and simple renal injury model. It is a prospective study. The patients received valve or CABG or valve combined CABG surgery. We use critical criteria. 16,000 patients were included, and the CSA AKI incidence was 37.4%, and the RRT AKI incidence 1.1%. And also calibration was good, but discrimination was not good enough for the predictor of AKI development in our country, in our patients. And the potential reason for using included the following four, because we use the different AKI definition. In our study, we use critical criteria, and for the four models, we use different criteria. And the timing of renal replacement therapy is not standardized, and the surgery procedure distribution is different in our patients. Valve surgery was dominant in our patient, and less morbidity in our patient. We have less patients with diabetes or hypertension to receive cardiac surgery. And then we established a dynamic predictive score for cardiac surgery associated acute kidney injury. It is a prospective study from 2010 to 2013. More than 7,000 patients were included, and in derivation cohort, there are more than 6,000 patients, and in validation cohort, more than 1,000 patients. And the patients also received the valve replacement or CABG or valve combined CABG surgery. And we also use critical criteria. And the incidence of CSA AKI was 35.5%. And we can see that pre-operation, the risk of AKI development was male, age over 40 years, kidney disease without RRT, previous cardiac surgery, and NIHA classification over 2. And on ICU admission, male, age over 40 years, kidney disease, and previous cardiac surgery also remains a risk factor of AKI. And valve combined CABG surgery and erythrocyte transfusion was identified as a risk factor of AKI. And the post-operative risk factor include low cardiac output syndrome and the male age over 40 years, kidney disease, and CPP application, valve combined CABG, and erythrocyte transfusion also remain the risk factor of AKI. And depend on the scores, the risk of AKI development was categorized into low, medium, and high in accordance to the real AKI incidence. It is easy for clinicians to evaluate the risk of AKI. And we can see after inclusion, after inclusion the intraoperative risk factor and the post-operative factor, the predictive valve increased. And this is curve only inclusion pre-operative risk factor, and this inclusion at the intra-operation risk factor, and after adding post-operative risk factor, we can see the predictive value rises with the inclusion of intra-operation risk factor and post-operation risk factor. And how about AKI biomarkers? And this is a meta-analysis focused on NGAL in cardiac surgery. And 4 studies from China, we can see that in China patients, urine NGAL had the highly predictive nature for early diagnosis of CSA AKI, but it is not good enough for known cardiac surgery. And the limitation of NGAL, as we know, besides in AKI patients, urine NGAL increased also in CKD, anemia, tumor, inflammation, or infection patients. Let's talk about urine TIMP2 and IGF-BP7. As we know, renal tubular cells enter G1 cell cycle arrest following injury and protect from further damage. And both TIMP2 and IGF-BP7 are markers of G1 during cell injury. And we conducted a study to determine the optimal timing to detect urine TIMP2 and IGF-BP7. And this study conducted from in this year, and 57 cardiac surgery patients were included, and we collected the urine sample before operation and at ICU 2 hours, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 24 hours after ICU admission. And the overall AKI incidence was also about 33%, and the stage 1, 13%, stage 2, 3%, and stage 3, and the stage 1, 22.8%, and the stage 2 and the stage 3 both were 5.3%. We can see urine, the product of urine TIMP2 and IGF-BP7 peaked at 4 hours after admission of ICU. And there's a predictive value for CSA AKI was very good. And lastly, let's talk about urine ionomics of in the diagnosis of CSA AKI. As we know, ionomics is widely used in botanical research, but rarely in human research and never in AKI patients. And so we conducted a study to evaluate the diagnosis value of urine ionomics. We recruited 261 patients undergoing cardiac surgery, and the urine sample collected before operation and 12, 24, and 48 hours after operation. And we also use AKI critical criteria, and the AKI incidence was 35.2%. We can see that except this 4 iron or other iron urine level increased and peaked at 2 hours after operation. And this is the heat maps. And we found that urine ferrum and urine cadmium 2 hours after operation can best diagnosis the CSA AKI. This is the formula. And the AUC of prediction of AKI was relatively high, 0.76, and accuracy 0.82, and the specific 0.97, and the sensitivity 0.61. So it is a good model, prediction model for CSA AKI. And so I think urine ionomics is a promising method to diagnosis or to prediction AKI. So let's make a summary. AKI incidence is increasing in China, and e-alert is helpful of AKI awareness and early diagnosis, and the product of urine TIMP2 IGF-BP7 is the promising early AKI biomarker. And lastly, urine ionomics is worthy of further study for AKI early detection. Thank you very much.